October 1947. The California sky looks peaceful, but get ready for history. Someone's about to break the sound barrier. A shiny silver jet zips through the air. Its wings are bent back like a cat ready to pounce. Inside, a pilot grabs the controls of a plane the world hasn't seen before. This isn't just another plane. It's America's answer to the Cold War. This jet came from stolen enemy science, American ambition, and testing in dangerous skies. Before missiles ruled, this plane decided who owned the sky. This is the story of the F-86 Sabre, the jet that changed air combat forever. The F-86 Sabre's story starts after World War II. Air combat, tech, and global power were all changing fast. The planes that ruled a few years before were now old news. Speed and jets were now what mattered in the sky. North American Aviation made the P-51 Mustang. After the war, they had to design a jet fighter to win the next war. By 1945, it was clear that propeller planes couldn't go any faster. As they hit 400–5,500 miles per hour, planes had problems with control and stress near the speed of sound. Jets were a fix, but early jets had issues with control at high speeds. At the same time, we learned that Germany was way ahead in plane design. Even though they lost, they left behind data and prototypes about swept wing design. Allied engineers said swept wings delayed problems when planes flew near the speed of sound Mach 0.81.0. Angling the wings back slowed airflow, reducing shock waves. It was a cool idea. American engineers at North American Aviation knew future fighters needed swept wings to survive high-speed combat. Early U.S. jets like the P-80 Shooting Star used straight wings and were almost at their limit. North American made a big choice. They'd changed their design to use swept wings. The first design, NA 140, was a straight wing jet, but after seeing German research, they changed it. The wings were bent back 35 degrees. They reshaped the plane and changed the air intakes to deal with airflow. This change was a big deal. The result was a fast-looking jet fighter. It looked fast even when still. They added the General Electric J47 turbojet engine, which was strong and reliable. The Sabre could fly safely near the speed of sound. Other planes shook and lost control. The Sabre fixed these issues with asterisk swept wings, asterisk and all, moving horizontal stabilizer. Asterisk better control surfaces. Asterisk stronger structure. Test pilots said the Sabre briefly went past Mach 1. This made it one of the first planes to get close to the sound barrier. The XP-86 prototype first flew on October the 1st, 1947. Right away, it was clear this plane was special. Test pilots loved it. Asterisk, it handled well at high speeds. Asterisk, it had an awesome roll rate. Asterisk, it was stable when flying near the speed of sound. Asterisk, the controls responded quickly. The U.S. Army Air Forces, which soon became the U.S. Air Force, saw the plane's potential instantly. By 1949, the F-86 Sabre was officially in service. It was the first American swept-wing jet fighter that was good and came at just the right time. A year later, everyone would realize how needed it was. Before it even fired a shot, the Sabre showed a big change in American air power. Asterisk speed was now as important as being able to maneuver. Asterisk flying high and climbing fast were now key. Asterisk jet fights were going to happen. Asterisk tech would win air wars faster than just having more pilots. The F-86 wasn't just a plane, it showed that the United States was ready for the jet age like everyone else. When the Korean War started in June 1950, the F-86 Sabre was ready to be more than just a plane and ready to become a legend. What happened in the skies over Korea changed jet warfare forever. When North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel, the United States was at a disadvantage in the air at first. Early U.S. jets like the F-80 Shooting Star were fast, but not that great. They had straight wings and didn't perform well at high altitudes and struggled when near the speed of sound. Then a surprise happened. In late 1950, pilots and intelligence officers reported that a new Soviet jet had appeared over Korea. It climbed faster, flew higher, and was faster than anything the United States had. This plane was the MiG-15. The air power balance changed fast. The area for this fight was in northwestern Korea near the Yalu River, called MiG Alley. This wasn't just any battlefield. At over 40,000 feet, pilots fought at near supersonic speeds. There were no missiles or computer targeting. Pilots used skill, instinct, and nerve. Every fight was like a fast chess game in the sky. The MiG-15 was tough. Asterisk, it climbed fast. Asterisk, it had big guns, 23mm and 37mm cannons. Asterisk, it performed great at high altitudes, but it had weaknesses, and the Sabre was made to take of them. The F-86 Sabre was very similar to the MiG-15. Both planes had swept wings based on German tech. Both could fly near Mach 1 when diving. Both defined jet combat, but the Sabre had important advantages. It could roll quickly, allowing pilots to reverse turns faster. It had controls that helped pilots handle the plane easily at high speeds. It had radar to improve aim. Pilots had better visibility from the cockpit, a subtle but life-saving edge. MiG pilots often used engine power and flew upward. Sabre pilots were better at dogfights that happened in the sky, turned speed into precision. The sky became where tactics mattered as much as machine. Tech didn't win MiG Alley alone. Experience did. Many American Sabre pilots were World War E vets, men who had fought in the air in propeller-driven fighters. They got used to jets quickly, bringing tactics. On the other side, MiG pilots were trained, but had limited combat experience. Some were Chinese or North Korean pilots getting used to jet combat. Some were secretly Soviet aces, flying under orders so they wouldn't be captured. Every dogfight had political consequences. If a Soviet pilot was shot down and captured, the war could get bigger than Korea. One of the Sabre's advantages to fly near the speed of sound. In steep dives, the F-86 could go over Mach 0.95 something earlier jets had trouble with. Pilots used this speed to dive away from danger or attack before climbing back. MiGs could climb faster, but Sabres could handle speed better. That often decided who survived. By the end of the war, the U.S. Air Force believed the Sabre killed 10 enemy planes for every Sabre lost. Later, research showed the ratio was closer to 2-1 or 3-1. But even conservative, the estimates confirmed the F-86 Sabre was better in the air against enemy jets, and it did so a lot. Famous fighter pilots made a name flying Sabre. Pilots who managed energy well. Aces who knew not to fire. Men who knew that survival was victory. Dogfights often ended without shots fired, just one pilot putting the other in a losing position. Jet combat had matured. The Korean War taught the U.S. Air Force stuff about air combat that still matters now. Speed isn't everything. Good pilot training beats a plane that just looks good on paper. Knowing what's going on around you is key to winning. Being able to handle your plane at high speed is super important. The Sabre wasn't perfect, but it had a good mix of everything, and that's what wins wars. By 1953, things had quieted down in the skies over Korea, but the F-86 Sabre's story wasn't done. What it did in MiG Alley didn't just help win a war, it changed the way everyone designed fighter planes after that. By the early 50s, the Korean War had shown us one thing for sure. The F-86 Sabre was only as good as the person flying it. We're going to talk about how the Sabre fought, who flew it, and why it changed air combat forever. The pilots who flew the F-86 were different from anyone before them. Most had flown in World War I guys who had flown propeller planes like the P-51 Mustang or P-47 Thunderbolt. They had experience. They were tough from fighting, but jets were something completely different. Jet combat was faster, higher, and there wasn't much room for mistakes. If you messed up in a prop fighter, you could sometimes fix it. But in a jet going super fast, one bad call could be deadly. The Sabre made you fly smart. Pilots had to learn new stuff. Think about energy, not just turning. Use altitude like money. Speed keeps you alive. The guys who could do this did well. The ones who couldn't didn't last. The U.S. Air Force quickly learned that if you flew jets like you did in the old dogfights, you'd get killed. So they changed the training. Sabre pilots were taught attack from above, hit hard and fast, then get out of there. Go up and down instead of just turning. Know what's going on around you, even when you're going over 600 miles per hour. Unlike earlier wars, pilots were now fighting in three ways. Up and down were just as important as left and right. The Sabre's wings let it stay in control even when going really fast, but only if the pilot knew what he was doing. If you pushed it too hard, things could go wrong and you could lose control. Flying the F-86 was like having a conversation with the plane all the time. What made the F-86 Sabre better than the planes it was fighting wasn't just speed, it was how well it was made. Some important things that helped. D1, hydraulic controls. The Sabre's controls made it easier for pilots to fly smoothly and accurately at high speed, which was really important when a split second could mean life or death. To all flying tail later versions. This made it much easier to control the plane when going almost the speed of sound, which gave Sabre pilots an edge. The Korean War taught the U.S. Air Force lessons that still define air combat today. Speed alone is not enough. Pilot training matters more than raw performance. Situational awareness wins fights. Control at high speed is everything. The Sabre wasn't perfect, but it was balanced. And balance is what wins wars. By 1953, the skies over Korea had fallen silent, but the story of the F-86 Sabre was far from over, because what it achieved in MiG Alley didn't just win a war, it reshaped every fighter aircraft that came after it. By the early 1950s, the Korean War had proven one undeniable truth. The F-86 Sabre was not just a machine, it was only as lethal as the pilot who mastered it. This session is about how the Sabre fought, who flew it, and why it changed aerial combat forever. The pilots who climbed into the F-86 were unlike any generation before them. Most were World War I veterans, men who had flown piston engine fighters like the P-51 Mustang or P-47 Thunderbolt. They were experienced, battle-hardened, but jets were an entirely different beast. Jet combat happened faster, higher, and with far less margin for error. In a prop fighter, mistakes could sometimes be corrected. In a jet at near, supersonic speeds, a single misjudgment could be fatal. The Sabre demanded discipline. Pilots had to relearn everything: energy management instead of turning fights, altitude as currency, speed as survival. Those who adapted thrived. Those who didn't last long. The U.S. Air Force realized quickly that traditional dogfighting instincts could get pilots killed in jets. So training evolved. Sober pilots were taught boom and zoom tactics, attack from altitude, strike fast, disengage, vertical maneuvering instead of flat-turning fights, situational awareness at speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. Unlike earlier wars, pilots were now fighting in 3 dimensions. Up and down mattered as much as left and right. The Sabre's swept wings allowed it to retain control at transonic speeds, but only if the pilot respected its limits. Push too hard and the aircraft could compress, lock controls, or bleed energy dangerously. Flying the F-86 was a constant conversation between man and machine. What truly separated the F-86 Sabre from its enemies wasn't just speed, it was refinement. Key technological advantages included: 1. Hydraulic controls. The Sabre's powered flight controls gave pilots smoother, more precise handling at high speed, critical when fractions of a second decided life or death. 2. All flying tail later variants. This innovation dramatically improved pitch control near the speed of sound, giving Sabre pilots confidence where other jets struggled. 3. Advanced gun sight. A1C radar ranging gun sight. This was revolutionary. The gun sight calculated target distance, closure rate, lead angle. Pilot no longer had to guess. They placed the pipper and fired. Against MiG-15 pilots who often relied on visual estimation, this was a massive edge, especially in high-speed passes. This single piece of technology increased kill probability dramatically. Sabre tactics vs MiG tactics. While both aircraft were fast, their strengths were different, and smart pilots exploited that. F-86 Sabre strengths: superior roll rate, better high-speed handling, more stable gun platform, better pilot visibility. MiG-15 strength: Sable, higher ceiling, faster climb rate, heavier armament. Sabre pilot learned not to chase MiGs straight up. That was suicide. Instead, they forced MiGs into dives where Sabres handled better, used rolling scissors and vertical maneuvers, attacked in pairs, covering each other constantly. This wasn't individual heroism, it was disciplined teamwork. The Sabre encouraged formation tactics, mutual support, and calculated aggression. Lone wolves rarely survived long. Despite the danger, some pilots achieved legendary status. Jet aces were born, men who mastered speed, altitude, and timing with surgical precision. Becoming an ace in a jet was far harder than in WEI, fewer engagements. Shorter windows to fire, stronger enemy aircraft. Yet Sabre pilots did it. Their success wasn't luck, it was superior training, better tactics, better aircraft integration, and perhaps most importantly, at 35,000 feet, oxygen masks on, contrails slicing the sky, pilots had seconds to choose: fight or disengage and live to fight again. The Sabre didn't just dominate physically, it dominated mentally. MiG pilots knew when they were facing Sabres. They recognized the silhouette, the contrails, the tactics, and they knew the odds. Sabre pilots, confident in their aircraft and training, often dictated the fight. That confidence translated into aggression, controlled, calculated aggression. The sky over MiG Alley became a chessboard: feints, baiting climbs, coordinated traps. Victory went not to the fastest aircraft, but to the pilot who stayed calm when everything screamed panic. This session marks a turning point. For the first time in history, Third's air combat was no longer about turning circles. Victory depended on systems, training, and human discipline. The pilot became part of a larger technological ecosystem. The F-86 Sabre didn't just introduce jet combat, and what came next would push that evolution even further, beyond guns, beyond visual range, and into a future no pilot of World War I could have imagined. But even as the Sabre proved itself in combat, a new question loomed. Was the era of gun-fighting jets already nearing its end? By the early 1950s, the F-86 Sabre was no longer just a single aircraft. It had become a platform, a living, evolving machine that changed with the war, the enemy, and the demands of jet-age combat. What began as a breakthrough fighter quickly turned into an entire family of Sabres, each variant refined to answer one brutal question: how do you stay ahead when the sky itself is changing? The earliest production models of the Sabre were impressive, but combat has a way of exposing weaknesses mercilessly. Pilots reported issues with high speed control stiffening, gun effectiveness at jet closing speeds, limited radar and situational awareness, fuel endurance during long patrols over Korea. Instead of treating these as flaws, American engineers treated them as data points. The Sabre would not stay still. The F-86A, the first true Sabre. The F-86A was the first operational version to reach combat units. It introduced swept wings optimized for transonic flight, a top speed nearing Mach 0.9, 0.6 .50 caliber M2 Fari Browning machine guns, hydraulic flight controls that allowed precision at high speeds, but jet combat was unforgiving. At near supersonic speeds, even fractions of a second mattered, and pilots wanted more. The F-86E and F-86F, refinement under fire, combat over Korea directly shaped the next variants, and MAX variants. F-86E introduced an all-flying tailplane, replacing the traditional elevator, dramatically improved control near the sound barrier, gave pilots better pitch authority during vertical maneuvers. This single change altered dogfighting forever. Pilots could now recover from high-speed dives safely, maintain control in transonic turns, match the MiG's high-altitude agility. Then came the most famous variant of all, F-86F. More powerful General Electric J47 engine, improved wing design, 6'3" wing for better turning performance, strengthened airframe for higher G loads. This was the Sabre at its peak, fast, forgiving, deadly. The Sabre occupied a unique moment in aviation history, the space between eras. It was designed for guns, not missiles, and yet it arrived at the dawn of guided warfare. At jet speeds, a closing rates exceeded 1,000 miles per hour. A firing window could last less than 1 second. Pilots needed instinct, not computers. The Sabre's 6 machine guns were devastating when aimed correctly, but demanded skill pile, no fire. And forget, no radar-guided solutions, no second chances. This is why Sabre pilots became legends. The aircraft did not carry them, it demanded they rise to it. Avionics. Simple, reliable, ruthless. Compared to modern fighters, the Sabre's avionics were minimal, and that was its strength. Gyro gun sight computed lead automatically. Radar ranging improved accuracy without complexity. Clear canopy offered unmatched visibility. Controls were intuitive, responsive, and predictable. In chaotic dogfights, simplicity saved lives. While enemy pilots wrestled with unreliable systems, Sabre pilots trusted what they could see, feel, and aim. Technology alone didn't define the Sabre, its reputation did. Enemy pilots learned to recognize it instantly, the distinctive swept wings, the polished aluminum skin flashing in the sun, the tight, disciplined formations. When Sabres appeared overhead, MiG pilots often disengaged unless they had altitude advantage. Not because the Sabre was invincible, but because it was unforgiving in capable hands. After the Korean War, the Sabre didn't fade away, it spread. Over 30 allied nations flew Sabres, including Canada, United Kingdom, Japan, Pakistan, West Germany. Each nation adapted the aircraft to its own doctrine: interceptor, fighter, bomber, trainer, air defense backbone. In many air forces, the Sabre wasn't just a jet, it was the foundation of modern aviation culture, an aircraft that taught the world to fly fast. More than its kills, more than its victories, more than its speed, the Sabre's greatest legacy was education. It taught an entire generation to how to fight at the edge of physics, how to respect transonic flight, how human judgment still mattered in the jet age. It bridged the gap between WY instincts and modern aerial warfare, and by doing so, it ensured that when missiles arrived, the pilots were ready. By the mid-1950s, newer fighters were already on the horizon. Supersonic aircraft, radar, guided weapons, missiles replacing guns. But none of them would have existed as they did without the lessons learned inside the cockpit of the F-86 Sabre. This wasn't just an aircraft, it was the proving ground for everything that came next. By the mid-1950s, the roar of the F-86 Sabre was slowly fading from the front lines, but its influence was only beginning. The Sabre did not disappear in defeat or failure. It stepped aside, having already won its place in aviation history. Jet technology was advancing at a brutal pace. Within a decade, aircraft were leaping from subsonic to supersonic, from gunfighters to missile platforms. Fighters like the F-100 Super Sabre and later the F-4 Phantom II were emerging, faster, heavier, more complex. Yet the F-86 remained something special. It represented the perfect balance of speed without instability, power without excess, simplicity without weakness. Many pilots who transitioned to newer jets quietly admitted something surprising. Nothing ever felt as pure as the Sabre. Unlike many American aircraft, the F-86 didn't stay confined to U.S. squadrons. It became a global jet icon. More than 30 allied nations flew the Sabre, including Canada, United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Pakistan, Australia, West Germany. In several countries, the Sabre became their first true modern jet fighter, shaping air forces from the ground up. Notably, in South Asia, Sabres would later face MiGs again, this time over the skies of the Indian subcontinent, proving that the aircraft's combat relevance extended far beyond Korea. Even after frontline retirement, the Sabre had one more mission. Its forgiving handling, clear feedback, and responsive controls made it ideal for training. Pilots learned energy management, high-speed turning, gun accuracy, jet discipline. The Sabre didn't just win battles, it trained the men who would fight future wars. Many Cold War-era aces learned jet combat fundamentals in the cockpit of an F-86. The Sabre quietly rewrote fighter design philosophy. Its legacy shaped its swept wing aerodynamics as a standard, hydraulic flight controls, high-speed stability research, human-centered cockpit design. Aircraft designers learned a crucial lesson from the Sabre Pro. A fighter doesn't need to be terrifying to be lethal. It needs to be controllable. This principle echoed into every successful fighter that followed. Today, the F-86 no longer patrols borders or scrambles for intercepts, but it still flies. Restored Sabres appear at air shows, slicing through the sky with the same smooth authority that once ruled MiG Alley. When one passes overhead, the sound is unmistakable, not thunderous like modern jets, but clean, sharp, alive. A reminder of an era when combat depended not on screens and sensors, but on eyesight, instinct, courage, and skill. The Sabre wasn't the fastest jet ever built. It wasn't the most heavily armed. It wasn't the most advanced. But it was something rarer. It was right. Right at the moment history demanded it, right in the hands of the pilots who flew it, right in proving that American jet aviation had arrived. The F-86 Sabre didn't just fight the MiG-15, it fought uncertainty, it fought technological doubt, it fought the fear that the jet age might outrun human ability. And it won, not with brute force, but with balance, brilliance, and belief. The Sabre didn't just survive history, it shaped it.